Michelle Gervais, the co-chair of the sports law practice at Blank Rome in sunny Florida. Welcome, Michelle. Happy to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Bobby. Happy to be here. Yes, it is sunny Florida, but man, with this heat wave that's coming through, it feels like a little bit of a sauna.
Yeah, well, that's what I hear. A lot of the country's going through that. I was just talking to our executive director in the DC area, and she says there's a big storm blowing through there right now, getting ready to start. So I'm not going to complain about sunny Southern California. Anyway, as I'm sure you know, what we'd like to do is start off, because if I simply say, oh, Michelle's the co-chair of a sports practice at a law firm, what does that really mean? So we like to start, and if you could give us just an explanation of sort of the nature of your practice and the firm, and then get into, what was your path to find yourself there?
Sure. Thank you so much. So, so about earlier this year, I was named the co-chair of the sports practice for Blank Rome, based out of Philadelphia. I joined the firm about 7 years ago, and at the time, they didn't have a sports program or a sports kind of like group per se, but there's a lot of folks doing it around the firm, and worked on it, worked on some marketing. And lo and behold, all these years later, it's more formalized, and it's a sexy practice as it can be. And some of the work that I get to do is a little sexier than others. So, I do everything off the court, off the field, off the ice, that a player might need, or somebody involved with a player. Basically, I will give props to Ken Shropshire, who got me involved in this about 10 or 12 years ago and said, you're doing all this work for C-suite folks and high-level executives. He's like, you love sports. Why are you not doing this in the sports field? And I was like, I don't know. Why am I not doing it? And lo and behold, that's where it started. He took me to my first Sports Lawyers Association conference back about, 10 or 11 years ago. And I was really fortunate to get to work with him on some matters, and we were really building a practice. That's when most of you all know him as the professor, right? But he actually is a lawyer and got to practice for a little bit of time, and at our the former firm we were at. And then about 7 years ago, my then 5-year-old came to me and said, "Mom, will you stop traveling?" Because I was working in Miami and living in Tampa, and I was like, well, I must be like the worst mother in the world. What do you mean? Like I get to work from home because we didn't have an office in Tampa, and I got to help out at the lunchroom at school, and got to go to her sports, and and then do my work all around that. And she's like, I just want you home at night. I don't want you traveling so much. And I was like, oh, okay, take it from a 5-year-old. And the Pittsburgh office at the time for my former firm, the firm Ken and I worked at together, left and became the Pittsburgh office of Blank Rome. And I was very close with a lot of lawyers there. And they said, hey, you want to stop traveling? This is all in the same week. So I feel like my 5-year-old was speaking to them and said, do you want to stop traveling and come work at our Tampa office? And I was like, sure, that sounds great. And then I had to break it to Ken. And then Ken went back to teaching. So that's kind of how I got here. It's a unique kind of a way of getting here, but I really, really love what I do. I think I really feel fortunate that I get to work and see athletes for the human beings, and get to work with them every day, and really understand it from a different perspective, that they're human beings and they're just like you and I. They just get paid a little bit more.
Yeah, that's a nice way of saying it. But your practice you began as a litigator, right?
Yes.
And when you were doing when you began as a litigator, were you doing just straight commercial kind of litigation transactions, or what were you doing?
I was doing a lot of everything. I have said this to several students that have come through the SLA and asked me, what should I do? I want to work in sports. I said, the best thing you can do is become a generalist on some level, so that you have experience all over the place. If you want to litigate and you want to see and help draft contracts later because you can see the pitfalls, I say, go litigate, get in front of in a courtroom, get in front of a jury, do whatever you can to help educate yourself so that you can help educate your clients as you're moving through this. And, I really think that doing all of that different type of, the work, whether it was with insurance companies or it was working for, big companies, which later on, you end up working with endorsement deals and understanding how the business works in the background. And then you see these pitfalls. And then I started doing a lot of matrimonial work. And I was the only one at my prior firm doing it. So anytime anyone needed any, sign up, oh, we need help in this, our client needs this issue, or there's a divorce or a prenup, or can you help with this? I started doing for them. And then this just kind of happened.
Yeah, your firm, I think Blank Rome is, I don't know if necessarily known, but it seems to have a fairly big family law practice.
Oh, for sure. Yes.
And I think it's not unreasonable to assume that in that kind of a practice where you're representing athletes or team executives or whoever touches on the sports industry, that you may have to play that role that's a cross between a lawyer and a psychologist, if not a psychoanalyst, and talk to them about protecting assets and prenups and postnups. I assume that's true, and if so, how do you breach that very touchy topic with a client?
It's interesting, and yes, you're right. I just had a conversation earlier today with a great guy who, is a lot of our clients go through what I would call target practice, right? And they are sitting ducks for a lot of reasons. And just a great guy. And I'm like, okay, I'm about to tell you something, but I need you to keep this close to the vest, because we don't necessarily trust your circle right now, and you're going through contract negotiations, and this is a really important time. So yes, the psychology piece really comes into play. I did have a psychology minor, but I've learned so much more, in doing this work. One of my first paternity cases about 8 or 9 years ago with an athlete, and I'll never forget this, and it taught me so much. He was so worried, I think, I might be the father, it's possible. And the woman was, very respectful, but, thought her child, was his. And so I was working with her, and I said, okay, we're going to get a paternity test done. And at that point, I had 4 prior paternity cases that they were not the father, right? So I was like, I'm on a roll right now. and so and the client was young and a great football player and just a really great guy. And I'll never forget that I was able to talk the DNA testing facility into giving me the results over the phone, because if anyone ever deals with this, they're not supposed to. And I'm like, look, it's a Saturday. I need to let my client know. We can't wait till Monday. And he wasn't the father. And I called him, and I didn't get him right away. And I left a message, because again, it was Saturday. And I was like, I want to congratulate you. This is great news. It's awesome. I'm so happy for you. Let me know when you can talk. Well, saying that, of course, he and I had talked about the fact that, the last 4 had not been the father. And so I was excited, and he thought by me saying that he was the dad. So you should have heard, he called me back like immediately. And he was like, oh my God, I'm a father. And I'm like, oh my God, no, you're not. So I learned to be very specific in my voicemail messages.
Yeah, I think that's a good lesson, especially for any students that are listening in, which is what we always talk about, is if our profession as lawyers, as communicators and communications, it's the old, don't hit send on an email right away. Don't hit that little arrow on a text. Remember that will live on forever. And sometimes you're so excited, you want to share good news. We have to learn oftentimes to go, call me back, I have some news for you, is good enough.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
And also the means of communication, I think it's really important. Things change so much, and we're learning so much every day as lawyers, that we have to know more about our audience. And I think, you're working with younger athletes, they're unlikely to pick up a phone. They'll respond to a text message.
Maybe not. Social media might be easier.
Right. Hi, this is your lawyer on Instagram. Hit me up.
Yeah, it's true. It's absolutely true. I think, one of the things you said earlier, the way they communicate, especially with the athletes, they're no different than you or I. And I think it's really learning to be authentic and to be yourself, and to always remember that, that could be your brother, or your sister, or your parent, or, a cousin or relative or close friend. And how would you want them to get the news? How would you want to be spoken to? And most of, again, it's a lot of guys that I work with, but most of the guys that I work with, they just want to be heard. They want someone to understand them. And a lot of times, they skip school, or they don't get to finish school, or they didn't have parents around them or close family members around them where they could ask questions. I mean, I've had everything from being in a mediation and having a very well-known athlete literally turned to me and said, "What does private school mean? Like, I grew up in public and we didn't have money growing up, and I can afford this now and I know it makes sense, but what does that mean for me as a dad? Is that a good choice? What do you think?" And really taking a step back. And that was really eye-opening for me. And that was just recently. And I sat back and I said, what? It's a really great question. And we walked through it. And, we talked about maybe it's more of a security piece too, because of who you are and how well known you are, to know that your child's going to be protected. You may not have diversity like you might have it in a public school setting. Education is going to be a little bit different. And we really walked through that. And I don't know, it was actually a really cool conversation.
Well, I think that's an important part of communicating with any client, is especially when those of us who have particular expertise or niche practices, we know it, we understand it, we live it every day. And it's taking that breath to step back and realizing my client doesn't have that experience, doesn't understand that. Forget, nomenclature. They don't understand sort of the basic tools. So it's always finding that delicate balance to educating and informing a client without really patronizing them.
Absolutely.
And that's a huge challenge as a practicing lawyer, I've found over the years.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, right? Because I think, a lot of times too, especially for athletes who, come into a lot of money and they're working hard and they spend 90% of their life working. But they also feel like they should know more than they do, right? And it's feeling like it's allowing them to be vulnerable with you. And I think you have to build that rapport. I think, one of the things I learned during the pandemic, and then if we're really post-pandemic, I don't know, but learning how to be, when everything was Zoom and virtual because nobody was traveling, and doing, mediations or whatever type of case it was, without actually having met the client. What a difference when I came out of this and then going back to, what? I really do need to be there with them. I really do need to sit down, no matter who my client is, and really make sure that rapport is built up, and where they feel like they can be vulnerable. And it's in those moments, especially like mediation, when you're sitting there for 12 hours and there's so much time on your hands, where they feel like they can ask you questions that maybe they wouldn't feel comfortable asking in front of other people.
So let me ask you, in a judicial, or we'll call mediation a quasi-judicial environment, and you're doing it virtually over Zoom or whatever other platform is somebody is elected to utilize, how much more difficult is it in that environment when you can't feel the vibe in the room? And I know that might sound a little hippy dippy, but there's something about in person, reading a room, reading body language, seeing the whole thing, that I think helps the process of questioning or directing your client or whatnot. How did you manage that change in a virtual universe?
It's a great question. It was hard at first. And talking to judges about this, and what was really unique, they love it because they're now getting to completely read the room up close and personal, right? And they see your client's constant reaction to everything, where in a courtroom, they're looking all over the place. They're not getting everybody at the same time. For us as lawyers, right, the challenge is, how do I not have either the judge see that so up and close, especially if someone has a personal reaction, which is very normal, and how do I educate and teach my client not to react? Because I can't kick he or she under the table, right? Or I can't, send them a sticky note that says, hey, we got this, don't worry. It's hard. I spent a lot of time prepping because Florida did not shut down. So we were very active throughout trials, hearings, evidentiary hearings. I mean, you name it. And, judges don't even want you to be in the same room as your client because they're worried that there's coaching going on behind the scenes that no one can see. So you actually give more credence when you're not with your client. And I learned this from attending a bunch of webinars with judges to hear their perspectives. So that was really interesting. And then look, when we kind of came out of not traveling and going back into traveling, I thought, oh, I can save my client money. I don't need to be there in person. We can do this. And I realized, you know what? Maybe I need to do one and make sure that they're getting the most out of me for what they need. And so I did one for free, sort of. I traveled for free. I got there. Of course, the attendance wasn't right, but the cost of the travel and me being there was, we did it, for free, and it was such a great experience. I learned so much, and I feel like I was able, going back to psychology, help him settle his case. We had a temporary mediation during the pandemic when we weren't traveling, and I had been his lawyer for about a year almost because of the pandemic, and had never met him. This final mediation, I was with him and suddenly learned so many things about his relationship with his soon-to-be ex-wife and his kids that he did not learn during the first time at mediation, when even though it was virtual and we spent 12 hours, on a Zoom call, that I was able to help get the case settled in a way that he was really happy with. And so I think with Mom at the end of the day.
Well, I think at the end of the day, we all want only happy clients, because happy
Sure.
clients come back.
Absolutely. And you're so right. I mean, this is how it works.
So as we're moving out, and I think that to a certain extent, the country has opened up significantly, obviously with these new strains. Who knows what's going to happen next around the country? But in your practice, are you bullish on continuing to do virtual mediations and hearings and whatnot, or does the story that you just told, does that make you feel like the in-person really does still matter?
So I think the in-person really still matters significantly, but I think that everybody else can be virtual. So I think we've still managed to keep costs down and maybe some of the stress of having everyone in the same building. And I think that we've done a really great job. I've had several, I think it's been 4 mediations now where I've been in person with the client. And of course you have to have the right equipment, but we had the mediator up on a big screen, and then we had opposing counsel just stayed in their own remote room, and they have been with their client as well. And I think it just really, really worked. I thought the mediator was amazing and was effective and fantastic, which also gives us the opportunity to use mediators who aren't necessarily in our jurisdiction, but mediators who get it and who are just really good at what they do.
So here's a question that I think you're well suited to answer, which is, do you have a different methodology or practice when you're dealing with clients who have come to you for the negotiation of a transaction versus clients that come to you in a litigation environment?
No, because I think at the end of the day, I think you have to approach every litigation with a negotiation tactic. I don't think, and I'm sure, Bobby, you probably agree with this, I don't think it helps anyone to go to court with a judge who doesn't know either side really well and not know how they got up that side, that day, from bed, waking up, and what mood they're in, and having to make a decision that's going to impact people potentially for the rest of their lives, or their kids, if there's kids involved. So I always try to approach everything the same way. How do we resolve this? What is in the best interest of my client and their kids, if there are children? How do I keep their brand protected? What do I not want to see in the press? Litigation, especially with the clientele we deal with, will end up in the press, right? Because everything is interesting. And then because of this word of mouth, and you talked about it a little bit earlier, and because a happy client then talks to their friends and comes back, I get the calls where, hey, I need you to get this guy out of jail. I know you're not a criminal lawyer, but I know you can handle it. And he brought a gun to the airport. Can you do it? And it's 11 o'clock at night, my time. And I'm like, sure, I can do this. And took care of it, right?
Well, which is the advice I have given for years to law students. I said, the number one rule, when somebody walks into your office, especially if it's a partner or someone for whom you're working in a firm, and they say, I need you to do this, there's only one phrase you can never use, which is, I've never done that before.
Right, right. It's so
We
true.
we we have the skills and the training and the resources to come up with an answer.
Yep.
Once you've started, if you have questions, people love questions.
Yeah. Wait, and by the way, my props to the SLA. With my work in the SLA and going to the conferences every year, I have this network of, I will say, friends, because I feel like they're friends all across the country, who I made 2 phone calls at 11 o'clock at night, had the right people in LA County and had it handled, right? And, that's again because of the SLA. So, it's a fantastic organization.
She has not been paid for this endorsement of the SLA. Let me just put that out there. But that is part of what we like about the organization, and so many people have said the same thing, is that, and I tell this to law students all the time, you are trained to research and solve problems. But people are resources that are maybe more valuable and more expeditious than spending time in the library. I don't refer to books anymore because I don't know if books are even used. But
I miss them, by the way.
yeah, but we have the skill set to solve things, but that doesn't mean that you can't pick up a phone and say, Bobby, I've got a client's got a case. The network is saying that this is what's normal. Is that what's normal? And I can tell you the answer and give you some examples. Now you have some informed information. You go back to your client, you've got something, and you can go to the back to the people you're dealing with and saying, that's that's not normal.
Right. No, look, that's absolutely true. During the pandemic, do you remember when the NFL was doing their first draft virtual, and I got a call and said, I know you don't do this. And then I was like, I'm not sure anybody does this, but it was, we have a guy who's likely going to go, top 10, who is having his draft party, with his foster family, and, a biological parent has come out of nowhere and is threatening to kill him and the family, right? And we need to protect, and by the way, not in Florida, right? We
need a restraining order in Oklahoma. Please help us.
Right. And, we need you to take care of this, keep it out of the press, because we certainly don't want anyone to hear about this. But, keep them safe. I'm like, sure. And it turned out great. Not without a lot of stress going into it, but, again, you have the right contacts, you know how to research, you figure out the right people. Not everybody answers the phone. By the way, that's what you should teach your students to always answer the phone. Even if you think it's spam, you never know. And always treat your fellow lawyers in whatever, collegiality program, conference, association you're dealing with, that they're not only a future referral source, but also, can help you. And a lot of times everybody wants to help.
Yeah. I have a question here from our friend, Professor Steve Ross, asking if you can discuss more broadly the blank room sports practice. Is it exclusively based on personal family law, estate, other related services to sport figures, or does it include other branches of sports law practice?
So it includes anything you can think of, from NIL to, endorsement deal review, to white collar criminal. I mean, I got to tell you, this last year, I've never seen more allegations of inappropriate sexual relations, which are unfounded, and where our guys are totally sitting ducks, and you see the medical records, and you see the comments that are made in the medical records, and you're like, okay. And it's because, you're going through a contract renewal, and everybody knows it, and they know you're about to hit a ton of money, and you weren't intimate with this person since 2.5 years ago, and now you're coming forward. A little strange. And we also handle, I've had a bunch of alleged STD cases in the last 8 months, and then we handle everything else. We do, like I said, that we won't handle anything an agent would handle. We won't handle things directly, generally with teams, but everything else that you could possibly think of, including their not-for-profits and setting up their boards and setting up their foundations. There's so much great work that is being done by our professional athletes all over this country that nobody ever hears about. And, a lot of guys want to go back to their hometown, and we helped a guy, help with a zoning to rezone a whole area where he grew up to build multifamily homes to help bring growth, to help bring it, into maybe a little class out of poverty. and, helped with code violations, helped with purchasing the property. We do real estate. We, you name it, we do it.
I think that's a really good answer. And as we're winding down towards the end of our little short segment here, I first of all want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about your practice. I mean, we've had so many different people, but not somebody who's actually going to court doing sports things. So that sheds a nice light on the breadth of not just the practice, but certainly of the SLA membership. And just to remind everybody that, there's information behind, when you become a member of the SLA, go to sportslaw.org, join, become a member. I think you've heard from an unbiased source, my guest today, that there's a lot of value just in the relationships. And you'll find that people often talk in terms of the relationships that you build as a member of the SLA. And certainly getting back together again last May in Atlanta, I think shed a really bright light on the value of the in-person.
Oh, I don't know if it was, coming back and seeing everyone or, the actual agenda itself, but I have to say that was one of the best conferences I've attended in years. It was just amazing all around. So kudos to you and the board for doing such great work.
Well, thank you. And, we'll be back in Los Angeles. We were here in 2016. We'll be in the same place, JW Marriott at LA Live, downtown, May of 2023. I will step up and tell you right now, it's going to be a great program. We'll be coming up with a theme for this year, but I think we're also going to be announcing a little mid-year symposium. So stay tuned.
Nice.
Little half day, maybe a little longer program in November to sort of have a day of SLA interesting material. But, we're an active membership organization. So any of you out there that are listening that have ideas for topics or speaker ideas or any of the things, you can feel free to reach out to the SLA, reach out to me personally. Very easy to find me, bobbyhacker@gmail.com, not much easier than that. And we'd be happy to consider any ideas. And we, at our mid-year board meeting in November is where we lay out the following year's conference. So between now and November, anybody out there that has some topics or ideas, there are a lot. We're 1 year into NIL. And for those of us that have touched upon it, there's a lot more to come.
Oh, right. I mean, you must just be constantly busy with that.
It's an interesting area and just trying to learn about it. And in the scope of it all, who knew that you'd actually have to know antitrust law?
Right. Who knew?
Anyway, Michelle, thank you so much. Really appreciate having you as our guest today. And thank your firm also for being such a good friend of the organization. We really appreciate that. And we'll see you soon. Take care. Have a great summer.